Good afternoon again. My name is David from Odessa, Advanced Health Environment Solution of Africa. Good afternoon, I'm John Machibula from Pumalanga Commuters Organization.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mpongwe Mdarane from Sasol Stakeholder Relations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mrs. Kumalu from CSIT.
And I'm Rita Bilenjim. I'm also from Stakeholder Relations. So, as I mentioned, any other topics, Bumi, myself, and Nosiko will be here after, and Sis Nonzogas will be here to take your other concerns outside of environment. The one, maybe a quick announcement, we have NCA from the Bulletin who will be broadcasting live. So I hope everybody is comfortable for their faces to be shown or their voices to be broadcast live throughout the session. Everybody's comfortable? Then, because of POPIA, we need to be able to get your permission for your names, if need be, or your face to be shown. Is everybody else comfortable? Not David?
Yes.
You're fine. Okay. No, thank you. Then we can go ahead. Without wasting too much time, I think we will move on to our safety moment. I think if you've worked with Sasol, you would know that one of our priorities or one of our values is around SHE, or safety, and to ensure that we embed that culture of safety within our employees, our audience groups internally, and our stakeholders externally. We always start our meetings with a safety moment. So I'm going to hand over to Ilse, who's going to take you through a very interesting safety moment, which I learned something this morning. So I hope you will learn something new. Thank you, Ilse.
Thanks. Thanks, colleagues. So maybe just to take us a step back, and I've heard I must talk loud, so I'll try my best. Just to take us a step back, in November we had a small group, or a small consultation group. And what that means is, with a small portion of the community, we had a session and the focus was on learning. We had a consultation to understand what can we do better, what is the community suggesting to us, how can we make these engagements that we have twice a year, how can we do it better? So there was various suggestions. One of them was that the environmental moment, or the safety moment, we talk about the environmental calendar and how we celebrate these days on the environmental calendar. That was a suggestion, so that's why we're talking about today World Wetlands Day. But before we come to that, we definitely, also one of the requests was, what is our timeline for the year and what can you expect when? So then you can diarize it. So obviously we don't have the specific dates, but what we have is a bit of a timeline so that you can see when what is happening. So we're currently here in February, right? Thanks guys. We're here in February, and we have our public engagement showing our results for the past year. So it's not financial year, we're showing the past calendar year, all the data. So we're looking at 2025, all the emissions and ambient and projects that was done. And then in March we commit to send out the minutes, and then around about June we will have the next, let's call it a small consultation session. So, and that's where we consult. And then where our plan is to do a half-year public engagement then in July. So then we tell you for the first half of the year what happened and where we are, and then we'll distribute that minutes, and then the next small group consultation will be around about November, like it was last year, and then in February we will have then this year's full presentation on everything that happened. So the presentation flow is like, we talk about our ambient conditions, and my colleague Maura will take you through that, and that's the air that we breathe, the air around us, what did we see at the various stations, what is the conditions, and then Hannes will take us through our point source emissions. There in Sasol, where there is a point source or a release at a specific point, and he will take us through on what did we see there. We also will touch on for the last time on offsetting and what we achieved there. So let us move to the next slide, and then we talk about our environmental moment at the moment is on the 2nd of February we celebrated World Wetlands Day. And what does that mean for us here in the Highveld? So this is one of our very vulnerable systems, and it's actually the most vulnerable systems. And here in the Highveld, it plays a crucial role. It absorbs nutrients and salts and pollutants. And Hannes referred to in our previous session that we actually live in a swamp. It is a critical ecosystem in the Highveld for us. And that ensures high biodiversity and ecosystems that have a lot of diverse plant species. So if we look at this picture on the board, you'll see in the middle here is the Sasol complex, and then we see the two rivers, one on the north and one on the south. And then way here at the bottom, you see the Grootbossiespruit, and then you see here in white, there's it's written here as wetland. So what is a wetland? And the best way to describe it is, if you look at your body, your kidneys have the function to take the toxins and remove it from your body. And that is what the wetlands does for us. It can absorb salts and nutrients and pollutions. So it can filter the water. And that's why it is so important in the Highveld. It also prevents flash flooding, because it reduces the speed of the water going through the vegetation. It gives the plants opportunity to absorb these nutrients, and it will, if it reduces the flow, it will also reduce the risk of flooding. So what we at Sasol did is we looked at we've got a primary area and then a secondary area. That's the area just around Sasol. And we said, let's have a look, where is wetland areas that's maybe not optimal? And let's reinstate that wetlands to the way it's supposed to function. So we identified these portion here at the bottom, at the Grootbossiespruit, and we're going to reinstate that wetland, that it can function optimally. So there is projects in place that we're going to slow the water and have natural beams in place that the water can not form a small river and carve a river out, but that it can be like a swamp effect, that the water is dispersed over a bigger area, and that gives our plants the opportunity to function to the optimal. So looking at this month, February, the 2nd of February, we celebrated World Wetlands Day, and that refers also to the Ramsar Convention, and that is to protect wetlands. This is the most, we lose wetlands faster than we lose forests. So it's a really ecosystem that we need to look after and we need to protect. So we said all of us need to work together. Industry, community, all of us need to work together to protect our wetlands. So respect the buffer zone, report disturbances, and support restoration projects and efforts. So thanks everyone.
Thanks. Thanks again for the guys that made the time available to come and attend here today. So last year, April last year, basically was a huge milestone for us from the Secunda operations side. For the last 10 years or so leading up to the 25th, we were running a large number of projects, as you can see here, to comply with the minimum emission standards as they were promulgated. And as of April 2025, those projects are all fully operational and we are fully compliant with the minimum emission standards. As a result of that, there's also a material reduction, as we'll see, in the emissions from Secunda operations. So for the next slides, I'm just going to give you a view on what exactly it is that Sasol did and what the impact of that is in terms of our emissions. So as you can see, there's approximately or close to 10 billion rand worth of projects that we've implemented over the past 10 years towards purely addressing our emissions and achieving compliance with the minimum emission standards. We go to the next slide. The next slide gives you a view of other projects. So these other projects are projects that's not linked to minimum emission standards, but also beneficial in terms of reducing or minimizing our emissions. There's the offsetting project, our emission offsetting project that concluded last year. It ran since 2017 basically. And over that period, we spent approximately 350 million rand on education and awareness, as well as addressing emissions within the community, specifically targeting coal stoves and swapping them out for gas stoves and gas-fired heaters, which is a much cleaner fuel. The wet sulfuric acid project, that one was specifically targeting our hydrogen sulfide emissions, additional removal capacity that was installed at a cost of approximately 1 billion rand. The VOC drains project, so this VOC project is over and above the ones that we installed for MES compliance, further reducing our emissions. Energy efficiency initiative, so that's something that we started, or a program that we in essence started off in the early 2000s and that we're still busy with. So what that does, it basically means for Sasol that you can make the same amount of product using less energy. In other words, make the same amount of product by burning less coal. And if you burn less coal, you ultimately put less emissions into the atmosphere. And the last one is our Clean Fuels project. So Clean Fuels is basically petrol and diesel that meets the new requirements for fuel, and that enables vehicles to optimally use the latest technology in terms of catalytic converters in their exhaust systems, so that you make sure that the emissions from your vehicles is really as low as you possibly can get it. And from that perspective, it's got an impact on air quality, not just in the Secunda region, but in the entire inland area, given the region that Sasol supplies with fuel. So the next few slides, these are just a list of projects that we've implemented. And in the next few slides, I'll give you a view of the implications of that, because we have spent now more than 10 billion rand. But aside from complying to the MES, what did it actually mean for us in terms of reducing our emissions? What did we achieve? So if we go to the next one, this is particulate matter emissions, and we started in 2019 and took it to 24 on this slide. The main reason for 2019 is that the projects that we've shown in the previous slides, their implementation started much earlier, but most of them only started coming into operation from 2019 onwards. So that's the point where you would start seeing the impact. And particulate matter emissions specifically, if you look at the Highveld priority area and the Secunda airshed specifically, particulate matter is the pollutant of concern. It is the one that every year, if you look at the air quality in Secunda, in Balenhle, Leboang, all around, that the national ambient air quality standard is exceeded. So for particulate matter, we have reduced the total amount of emissions from about 18 kilotons in 2019 to just above, let's make it 9 kilotons of emissions in 2024. So that means we basically halved the emissions. Now, having said that, the reason for that is twofold. The one reason that is the electrostatic precipitators that we've upgraded. We've installed new technology on them and we've refurbished them. And the efficiency in terms of the removal of particulate matter has significantly improved. In 2019, we operated close to around about 100 milligrams per normal cubic meter of particulate matter. Currently, we are averaging close to 30 milligrams per normal cubic meter, which is a significant improvement in terms of concentration. The other side of that coin is that we've also generated less steam. And in part that is due to some operational challenges that we had on the plant and not necessarily. But overall, the benefit of the ESPs is a significant reduction in terms of your particulate matter. On the NOx side, you see a very similar trend where we reduced from, let's say, about 170 kilotons there in 2019 to about 90 kilotons in 2024. What we did on the NOx side is on all of the boilers we installed low NOx burners. And you will see in the later slides that the impact that low NOx burners had when they came into operation, when all of them was put into operation. As I said previously, the impact in terms of our NOx emissions is an indication of the abatement technology we implement, as well as the amount of steam that we produced during the specific year. Dioxide emissions. So the sulfur dioxide emissions is mainly attributed to the quantity of coal that we are. So the more sulfur that's in the fine coal to the boilers, the higher the sulfur dioxide emissions you'll have. Which means that the impact you see here in terms of reduction of sulfur dioxide is mainly due to a favorable coal quality as well as lower steam generation during the past couple of years. Next slide. So we previously mentioned the significant amount of money we spent in addressing our VOC emissions. And if you look at that trend, you can see we took it down from, let's say, 55 kilotons per annum to 25 kilotons per annum. And that reduction is sustainable. That's something that, based on the projects we've implemented, we have realized a sustainable reduction of more than 40% in terms of our VOC from this site. The offsetting program that we referred to earlier, as I've said, that we implemented in 2017 and we concluded it during the last year. So at the end of all of that, we appointed an independent consultant to do what is impact assessment. It is part of reporting requirements. And that consulting, that independent consultant did an assessment specifically around the impact of the coal stove the implementation of that project. So they found 97% of the households are still using the gas and gas converted back to the coal stoves. So it's still in effect. Feedback from the community. In terms of the go to the next session, the next session is to deal with our compliance to our point sources. In other words, the emissions that's contained in our atmospheric emission license. But before I go into that, the question section that you would like to ask. Yes.
From Odessa. I was just listening to what was going on around the two areas indicating the, because a query in something like it's a chemical, but when we try to track it, it shows this direction for Sasol, and that is time to call. So I don't know what is the process there to that place. Part of government making.
We have, a little bit later on the slides, a cell phone. Send us either a cell phone, give us a call on the cell phone number, or just an email that will give us the nature of the complaint. Basically, when did it happen? When did you experience this issue? And also describe more or less what it smelled like in that period. It is important for us to get the time as close as possible, and also the area that it was experienced. Because what we will do then, if we have that information, we will use that to calculate the trajectory. And that trajectory, based on the wind directions and the atmospheric conditions at the time, that trajectory will tell us what the most likely origin is of that complaint, so that we can narrow down and, if not exactly what it is that you smell, but at least where it came from, and then we can take it further from that point. So, as I said, in the next slides, towards the end of the presentation, there will be a telephone number and an email address that you can use to communicate that for us. Please.
Hannes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Hannes, for this opportunity. Okay, I've been seeing Sasol is spending a lot of money, 350 million, 1 billion, 11 billion, just to improve the quality of the air. But I don't know whether the health side, improvement when it comes to the health of the communities that are...
So,
yeah.
from Sasol's side, I mean, Sasol is a private company, public company, well, private company, meaning we don't do health monitoring. We cannot do health monitoring. That's something from the Department of Health's perspective.
Yeah.
So we don't actually know in terms of the health of the community whether there's changes from that point of view. But the Department of Health will probably be able to give you information around that. What we can say is around ambient air quality. So that is part of my colleague Maura, his slides that he'll present in terms of a view on ambient air quality. But what that view will tell you is that particulate matter in Secunda is still a very big concern. It's it hasn't really changed in terms of that, meaning that the more than 10 billion rand that Sasol spent, yes, we reduced our emissions significantly, but you don't really see a similar improvement in air quality. So you would think if you reduce your emissions by almost half, you would see a big improvement in ambient air quality. But that's not there. So it tells you that the problems that we are struggling with is more than just Sasol. There's other sources that needs to be focused on and addressed to really resolve the problem we have with ambient air quality. So in the slides that's coming up, a slide on PM 2.5. And when you're talking about health concerns, PM 2.5 is the pollutant that's most relevant for health concerns. It's a very small, they call it a particulate, but it can actually also be a liquid droplet if you want to call it that, but it's small. It's really microscopic. It's so small that if you inhale it, it will go directly into your bloodstream via your lungs. And that's why PM 2.5 is really the pollutant of concern. Now, saying it's a particulate matter is also a bit of a misnomer, if you want. They classify it as particulate matter. But if you really want to understand the health risk, you need to understand the nature of that PM 2.5. As I said, it can get absorbed into your bloodstream. So if that PM 2.5 consists of a highly toxic material, it will obviously be a lot more problematic than something that's more innocuous. So if you have a PM 2.5 that's really just a small dust particulate, it will almost do nothing. But if you have a PM 2.5 particle, that's the fancy word that they use is a polycyclic aromatic or polycyclic hydrocarbon. So if you have something like that, that's usually the product of combusting waste or combusting poor quality coal or something like that. You get that as a byproduct. Now those things are poisonous. So if you get exposure to that, the consequences are much more severe and much more immediate. So if you really want to understand the implications of PM 2.5, you also need a view on the composition of PM 2.5. And that's something that I must say, from an air quality perspective, we don't fully understand yet. It is the work that's busy developing.
Yeah, okay.
So, if we look at the compliance with our atmospheric emission license, this slide is something that we show every year. It's a very high-level view of the Secunda facility, just for the purposes of giving an indication of the activities we are involved with. These activities are described in the minimum emission standards and are regulated in terms of that being contained in our atmospheric emission license. We go to the next slide. These following slides is our boiler emissions. On our boilers we have continuous emission monitoring systems. That's why you can see a nice trend over the entire year of our boiler emissions. What you will note there is that prior to April 2025, on the particulate matter, you had a limit here of 100 micrograms per normal cubic meter, and then that limit came down to 50, which is the current limit. So that's what I referred to previously. For MES compliance, we need to adhere to that 50 milligram limit, and that is what's in our atmospheric emission license currently. And the projects that we've implemented, you can see on the Eastern factory, the Eastern factory was already at the beginning of 2025, it was operating below the 50 milligrams. But on the Western side, that was not the case at that point. So the change there that you see around about March is the impact of the projects on the Western side coming online, as well as operational improvements and changes that was made during that period. And from then onwards, we are consistently well below the 50. As I said, we're averaging about 30 milligrams per normal cubic meter. So on the NOx emissions from the main stacks, there's a very similar picture. The limit before April was 1,000, and it came down to 750 milligrams. Again, you can see the performance on the eastern side looking better than west before the 1st of April. 1st of April, when everything came online, you can see the improvement there. The improvement is not as pronounced as on the particulate matter, but it is considerably lower than it was during the preceding period, and consistently below the 750 milligram limit. For SO2 emissions, that's something that's a bit more interesting. The limit before April, we had one single limit that was 2,000 milligrams, and that applied on both our east and our west stack. After the 1st of April, we had two limits. We now have two limits. The first one is on the west stack, and that's at 1,700 milligrams, and the second one's on the east stack, that's at 1,400 milligrams. So those limits was given to us as part of the Section 12A application. In combination with those limits, there's also a mass limit added to the SO2 emissions, that we need to ensure that the overall mass of the emissions must be below a certain value, 503 tons per day. In terms of the emission concentrations, in this case the blue line is the eastern one that needs to be compared to the green limit. So on the eastern side you can see we're doing quite well. On the west side you can see there's a bit of a challenge, especially since around about the middle of the year, with increased sulfur emissions, but we're still consistently below the limit in our AEL. Now the reason for that change that you see around about June is again changes in coal quality. It is purely dependent on the amount of sulfur that we get within our coal. So Sasol's objective is to find the best quality coal that we can, but ultimately that is subject to what is available and what can be sourced. And that does vary from time to time, and we do see that the coal on the west factory tends to be worse than the coal that we have on the east factory. So that's the difference there. Hydrogen sulfide emissions. On hydrogen sulfide we also have a concentration limit as well as a mass limit. The concentration limit is currently at 3,500 milligrams, but we never get close to that. The more stringent limit is the mass of emissions, and this will give you an overall view of where we stand in terms of the total mass of emissions, and you can see that's also consistently well below the limit in our atmospheric emission license. So before I hand over to my colleague for a bit more data on our ambient monitoring, as well as what we call our third-party compliance sampling. I've now given feedback on the boiler emissions. That's part of the continuous emission monitoring systems. But aside from it, we also have other point sources that's not in terms of impact the same as the boilers, but that requires monitoring on an annual basis. And my colleague Maura will give you feedback on that. But before I hand over to him, any questions on this section? Thanks, colleagues. Thanks, Maura.
Good afternoon once more, colleagues. I'll just take you through the performance of our ambient station in the past calendar year, 2025. From our map there, you can see we have about 7 air monitoring stations, 2 being in Valentia, Strait, Amersfoort, Lebohang in Leslie, and also as far as Springs there. And the one in Secunda, of course, you would have noticed is just outside here in Sasol Club. So yeah, these monitoring stations, all of them are accredited, SANAS accredited, South African National Accreditation, to ensure that they give reliable data. So we are audited based on that body to ensure that all our stations are working according to our standards. Then just on this, before we move, I'm sure some of you would have heard that this data that we get from our station, it's live data, but you can also get it from South African Air Quality Information System, which is available at the website that you can easily access, or on your phone in the form of an app that you can get from App Store, and actually see how our stations are performing for yourself. And this will definitely help when there are complaints or you have issues that you feel that they are coming from the factory, then you can see from our stations how the situation is looking like, and it can help us as well in terms of you giving us better information in terms of our complaints. Then PM issue that Hannes has already alluded to. This is PM10 or particulate matter between 2.5 micrometers, and this is how our stations performed in terms of last year's performance from January to December. But you will notice a significant increase when we move closer to winter until after winter there. And these contributing factors will be activities that we normally have in winter, like felt fires, coal-fired burnings, heaters and cookings, that we would see more prevalent during winter. And you will see that this phenomenon is more prevalent in Mbalenhle and in Lebohang as well during that winter, in as much as there is contribution from the factory. But like Hannah said, there are other sources that give this issues of increases. And this is just a comparison between Lebohang and Mbalenhle, which is more we get at the highest peaks during that winter season. So you can just see Mbalenhle is the most, and Lebohang also still high, a big issue in winter as well. PM 2.5 that Hannes was talking about as well, a big issue still, in as much as we see a issue more prevalent in Mbalenhle and Lebohang. There's still an issue we can see also in Secunda as well, and Bosjesspruit, not so much as in Mbalenhle, but it's still an issue that we need to take note of and ensure that we take care of it. And this is also 2.5 comparison between Mbalenhle and Lebohang as well. Yeah, the same story of winter swings. Nitrogen dioxide, not so much an issue. You can see we are well within our emission standard, below around average of 8.23 ppb per year. All right, Lebohang and Mbalenhle as well, although we see that winter swing, but still fares quite well for the average of the year. Yeah, not looking so bad. SO2 as well, not so much a concern as much as the PM was. And Lebohang, just to see how it's faring. Lebohang in this case is much more than Mbalenhle, but not an issue generally. Then when it comes to our dust fall monitoring as well, we have our dust buckets that we have at strategic places to monitor the dust that is coming out of our factory or in and out of our factory. And every month we get a report from our third-party service provider who manages the monitoring. All the dust buckets are installed according to the ASTM standard to ensure that we get the optimal dust collections or good reflection of what's happening in our communities and inside Sasol. So I'll just take you through how it was looking like for the past calendar year. This is the data that was collected from different places where we find these dust buckets from the first half of the year. Our limits is for the non-residential, which is what we consider required requires us to be below 600 milligrams per cubic square meter per day. And also, but the non-residential limit, it's a bit higher than that, or residential limit is a bit higher than that, which requires us to be below 1.2. So for the first part of the year, it was looking fairly good. We were well within that limit of 600, which is the residential now, but the requirement being the 1.2, well below that as well. There were a few issues of contaminations there and there. But according to our license, we should not exceed for more than 2 months in a calendar year. This is the first half. The second half, even better, no contamination or anything of note. But yeah, the numbers were looking fairly nice and low for the 2025 calendar year. Then, as Hannes alluded to it as well, we have also annual compliance sampling that we do every year from those identified point sources that we would want to see how much they are emitting, we complying to the licenses. So every year we would monitor those units that are listed on the graph there. We have a third-party service provider that does this work for us to ensure that we are kept honest and are not both the player and the referee. So reports is issued after those sampling, then we would compare and see if we are complying to the license. I must say, in comparison with a few financial years, there's been a significant improvement compared to this year. So far, there's been 2 exceedances, and when we have exceedances, there is a thorough root cause analysis investigation that is conducted, and corrective steps are taken to ensure that that specific point source complies to the standard. So this year we've had a few so far. There are still a few sampling that we will take on the orange that are planned, that we will still check as well how they are faring for the year. And yeah, that's pretty much the same story that we spoke about. And yeah, maybe next slide. Yeah, that's pretty much my story. I don't know if there are any questions on what I've presented.
Yeah, Moira, sorry for this slide. Can you share it, or is it only for Sasol? You cannot share.
So we can.
We can share it, and I do think just make sure that your name is on the attendance register, and you give us consent that we can use your email address.
Okay.
We've shared this presentation before the meeting,
Yeah.
so we will always try to share it before the meeting that the guys can prepare and be, that they can have good questions in the meeting.
Yeah.
But we can send it to you specifically. So I'll just tie up with you and get your mail address, and then we'll share it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much again for making yourself available for this session. I think the one thing I wanted to remind our partners is the number on the screen, that please just write it down. There's the cell phone number, or the number, the telephone number, as well as the email address that you can use if you need to send a complaint or share a complaint. So please, if you can make a note of that. The other thing that I want us to mention before we go, please make sure that you fill in the register, because we use the register when we invite for the next session. So if your name is not on the register, then it makes it difficult for us to share information like the presentation that we shared with those that were in the last session. If you were not in that session, then we would not have been able to send it to you. So please, if you can just make sure that your name is on the register to to be able to enable us to communicate with you whenever there is updates or there are invitations to such session. I think if there are no further here.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
Thank you.
We are
Thank
still
you
here.
once again for this opportunity. I don't know, just maybe a recommendation, Alex, or something.
Yeah.
You know, the health department you're talking about. Is it possible when we do have other engagement again so that they can be invited? Because I see the company spending a lot of money, but we want to see the value, you know, when it comes to... I'm not an expert on this, but in the morning I did a bit of research, you know, just to look around and, you know, I saw all these things that are, you know, the dangers of this air quality. You know, what it causes, you know, like asthma, sinus, chronic bronchitis, TB, and even miscarriages. You know, I was like, wow, even miscarriages. You know, me and my wife, we had 2 miscarriages when we came here in Secunda. 30 years now in Secunda, 1996. But really, you know, as I was browsing, just looking at the, just small research, you know, just to have an idea, I saw that there's a lot of things that this is very serious. But I'm happy that Sasol is spending so much money, you know, according to their values. I know it's people, it's planet, and it's also profit. Hopefully it's not the other way. So we are concerned about people. We want to see the value. You know, little children. I was looking, I was like, wow. You know what I saw on that research? I think there was a NASA satellite, you know, NASA satellite, and you know, they were showing the krill. I think it's the most polluter, especially Eskom. They pollute a lot, and you know, if it's okay, you know, let's just see on the health side whether there are improvements there.
We can invite them.
Yes.
Obviously, we cannot guarantee that they will attend, but
Okay.
we can definitely invite them.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thank you very much. And as I said earlier on when we started, that we would like you to participate, talk to us, and where possible, we'll talk back to you. I think the team has noted all the suggestions, the questions, and you can take it from us that whatever we've taken from you today, we will make sure that as we prepare for the next session, which is going to happen around June, if I remember, we will take this into consideration as part of our presentations, documents that we share. So whatever you've shared with us, we really appreciate that you were transparent enough, you were open to sharing your ideas with us. It is only through collaborating with you as our stakeholders and the communities around our operations that we can improve how we do things. And sometimes, you know, they say when you are too close to a subject, sometimes you don't see the bigger picture out there. And it is only by talking to other people who are on the other side that you will be able to then see the blind spots. So we thank you for sharing your observations, your experiences, and allowing us to be able to talk back to you and to spend time with you this afternoon. I think if there are no more questions or any further comments, I'm going to officially declare the meeting closed. However, the team is still here. If you need to speak to any one of us, we are here to engage. Thank you very much.